1954 is written in the pages of history. Korea, 3 years of fighting were over. A truce had been signed, and for many American boys, this was their final parade on Korean soil. They were homeward bound, and Miss Liberty welcomed them proudly as they returned. A war was behind them. Long weeks at sea were behind them. Ahead of them, the faces of loved ones and home. The long trail that began at Heartbreak Ridge ended at the foot of a gangplank. There was so much to say, and words were so inadequate, so useless. But the Indo-China War continued. The French and their colonial allies, their backs to the wall, fought on with American-supplied arms. In jungle and in valley forts with odd-sounding names like Dien Bien Phu, the long, bitter struggle continued. A clear-cut victory seemed unattainable. Both sides fought on while negotiations were initiated to end the 8-year struggle. Soldiers fought on in Asia and died, while diplomats assembled at the old League of Nations building in Geneva to talk peace. Here, for the first time, Red China's Zhou Enlai confronted the leaders of the West. With the backing of Russia's Molotov, China demanded a high price for peace. After weeks of stalemate, the new French Premier Mendès France and British Foreign Secretary Eden flew back to Geneva with their final terms for settlement. It was Mendès France, 18th French Premier since the war, who had staked his new government on a settlement by a certain date. This was the date. The American Undersecretary of State, Bedell Smith, came only as an observer for his country. A ceasefire agreement was signed by the French and the Viet Minh communists. The armistice terms placed 12 million people under communist rule, but ended a critical situation that had drained France of 92,000 lives and $8 billion. For the first time in 18 years, the world was formally at peace. Washington, a scene of gunfire in the halls of Congress. Puerto Rican terrorists opened fire from the visitors' gallery. 5 congressmen were hit, one of them seriously injured. The nation was outraged by the attack. Three men and a woman, seized by bystanders, were arrested and later convicted, along with other ringleaders in the plot to overthrow the government. In the United States and in Puerto Rico, members of the terrorist gang were rounded up. Linked to the communists, it is believed their arsenal was supplied by the Reds. Red-dominated Guatemala's representative protested to the UN over the revolt by forces of freedom. Guatemala was backed by Russia, first with weapons, now with words. But U.S. Ambassador Lodge invoked the Monroe Doctrine with this dramatic warning.
Representative of the Soviet Union, stay out of this hemisphere. And don't try to start your plans and your conspiracies over here. Translation.
At the Vatican, scenes of religious pomp and ceremony. 400,000 gathered in the Piazza San Pietro for the elevation of a pope to sainthood. Pius XII led the rites for Pius X, first pope to be made a saint in 242 years. Highest accolade of the church for Giuseppe Sarto, the cobbler's son who rose from humble parish priest to spiritual ruler of 400 million Catholics. He died in 1914, but his great works live on, forever a saint. Canadian Ambassador Heaney looked on at the White House as President Eisenhower signed historic legislation creating the St. Lawrence Seaway, long a dream of men on both sides of the border. A giant undertaking linking Lake Ontario with the Gulf of St. Lawrence, the Seaway Project would make it possible for big ships to sail all the way from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic. A 30-year dream became reality. Good neighbors. 1954 was a big year in sports. The mile of the century was run at Vancouver between John Landy of Australia, now leading, and Roger Bannister of England, both of whom had previously broken 4 minutes. Pulse-tingling drama unfolded on the final turn where Bannister overtook Landy and drove on to victory with one last reserve of incredible stamina and will. Both men broke 4 minutes. Sports history was made. 1954, a year of the hurricanes. With unintentional humor, weather experts gave them names of girls. But there was no humor in Carol, or Edna, or Hazel, born in the Caribbean, raised up over the Atlantic to lash the North American continent from the Carolinas to Canada. The hurricanes cut a wide swath of destruction across the land, cutting off power, destroying property. Terrific winds and torrential rains accompanied by flash floods that struck without warning. Hundreds lost their lives and property damage soared into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Hurricanes, grim reminders of the untamed forces of nature around us. First pictures of the H-bomb, the world's most awesome weapon of destruction. For dramatic effect, here superimposed over a great metropolis, is the fireball 3 miles across, which would instantaneously turn the city into an inferno. Science sees no limit to the potential power of H-bombs, which place an unthinkable destructive weapon in the hands of mankind. Man must harness its power for good. In Freedom's arsenal, the Scorpion carried a deadly sting of rockets. The Scorpion, biggest, longest-range jet interceptor, packs a wallop of 104 rockets. Mid-air refueling made it possible for our jet bombers to reach any target in the world. The B-36 Global Bomber, whose ability to carry the atom bomb anywhere on Earth has made it a great weapon for peace, shows its enormous destructive capacities. Every explosion you see came from this one plane's bomb load. In a world divided, weapons of war were potent factors in keeping the peace. A Scorpion dives down through the exhaust trail created by the rockets it just fired. Saber Jets unleash a fiery fury of gelid gasoline napalm bombs. On the diplomatic front, an historic achievement at Paris where Konrad Adenauer of Germany, John Foster Dulles of the U.S., and Pierre Mendès France signed the 14-nation pact. Upon ratification, a rearmed Germany joins the Defense Alliance for Western Europe. A grateful nation led by President Eisenhower acclaimed Secretary Dulles upon his return. Peace seemed more secure as 1954 became history.